Hi, Jason King here with the Baylor Sikkim 365 podcast for the Field of 68 Network, joined by my co-host Ashley Hodge and John Jacobs, Baylor's high-level elite assistant coach. I think everyone in Waco is so happy that he's part of Baylor's program and has been a huge part of the Bears' success this year, both on the court and also when it comes to getting some really good players to Waco. John, before we get into your background, before we get into this team, let's talk a little bit about your background. I think Baylor a little bit more about you. You're in your 4th year after coming to Baylor from Gonzaga. But tell us about kind of your journey here and how you ended up in Waco.
Yeah, I started off as a high school coach, and then I started working for an organization called Athletes in Action. And when I was with AIA, I coached some low-level college basketball, then started coaching Division I tours for them in the fall tour, and then I started coaching professionally overseas. Eventually, my ministry with AIA as a family, but also my coaching led to us moving overseas full-time and coaching professionally in Eastern Europe. And then kind of abruptly, my career was stopped. I've got 3 kids, and my second son was diagnosed with autism. And he's 12 now. He'll be 13 in a couple of months. He's still not talking. It's still a big part of our life, something me and my wife live with full time. And at that point, we knew we weren't going to stay overseas just because we wanted the chance of him being able to speak English, to speak at all. And you want to do that in your first language culture. So last thing I did overseas is our pro team hosted a little tournament that Athletes in Action brought a team to. And the guy who coached that team was Tim Maloney, who was the Gobo at Baylor at the time. Corey Jefferson was on that team, AJ Walton. There's Kansas guys on that team, Jeff Withey, you guys remember. It was a good team, really good team. And Coach Maloney and I became friends, and he heard what was going on with me and my wife. And just through him and a relationship with a guy named Mike Siegfrieds, who knew Scott and Homer Drew for a long, long time, Scott said, if you want to come to Baylor for 2 years and use the autism program on campus, we'd love to have you. So I stopped my career coaching professionally overseas to come to Baylor to try to help my son the first time around. And that was a great decision. But in my arrogance, I thought we were going to come fix my son and I was going straight back overseas. And that just didn't happen. That's become something that probably isn't an option for us because of where my son's at. So through Tim Maloney, who's really like an angel sent from God at like the best time in the world, and Scott Drew's open heart, the next step after that was for me to go to Gonzaga for 3 years, which is, I still don't know how I got that job. I mean, absolute connection through Grant McCaslin, perfect timing. Tommy Lloyd and Mark Few were unbelievable to me to even give me a chance. Obviously, I lived overseas and they do a bunch of international recruiting, so there's some things in common, but to get to be a part of that program was in a lot of ways life-changing, not just for me, but for my family. And then when Paul got the job at Oral Roberts, Paul Mills, Scott gave me a call and Jerome gave me a call and Jared Nunes gave me a call. And when the opportunity to come back to Baylor presented itself, it's something that my wife and I prayed about and we wanted to do. So I've been really blessed, really lucky, even in the worst of times. I've kind of found a way, and I know I'm a little bit of an outsider to college basketball business, but we backdoored our way in here, and we're really happy, and I'm thankful for everything Scott and Mark have done for me.
Yeah. I tell you, that's an amazing story. So many times we talk about the players and what their stories are off the court, but just hearing your story and just the way coaches look out for one another and care about one another and, help each other, when it comes to life, not just basketball, it's just really a heartwarming thing to hear. You said at Gonzaga, it was a life-changing experience. What did you learn there, and how did you grow, I guess, as a coach? How'd that help you the most?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we coach basketball. And sometimes people get lost on that, all right? We're not rocket scientists. So there's a lot of good coaches in the world. And a lot of people can figure out X's and O's. And certainly everybody's got an opinion. But the thing you'll learn from Mark, and for Scott too, is that program and culture kind of supersede team. And the unique thing about both of them is when you choose to stay as long as they've chosen to stay at their location, college basketball in general it's a business where people rent things. They rent things for a little bit of time. They get what they need out of it and they move on. And you're dealing with two guys that didn't rent a thing. They just chose to stay and build and build. It got better. They could have left. They said no. They kept building. Could have been better. They said no. You know what I mean? They just constantly said, I'm going to choose to love the place that I'm at. And when you do that, 10 years in, 15 years in, 20 years in, you're able to do some things around loving your players and the stability and the freedom of knowing, not that they're unfireable, but they're almost unfireable.
Yeah.
And then you watch the two of them work in that environment because of their faithfulness to the school that they've been at for so long. You really start to learn what you can do as a coach when you kind of remove fear and you live in the freedom of success and longevity and family and culture. So if you can find that in your career and you can humble yourself and realize basketball isn't probably the main thing when it comes to 18 to 22-year-olds, you're doing a good job. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I think they're getting the credit now and they deserve the credit for a long time. Not only do they recruit really, really well, but they always recruit the right person.
Yeah.
And Coach Tank says this, and I think we say this now, but I mean, Mark and Tommy and Brian and those guys, they just hit home runs over and over again. Baylor's not for everybody. But it's our job to find the ones that Baylor is for.
Yeah.
So you look at Adam Flagler, he goes unrecruited. Maybe he's not a perfect fit. He's got one offer out of high school. It's Presbyterian. Well, Adam's a perfect fit for Baylor. Yeah. And then you can get a ranked guy like Jared Butler, and he's choosing between Alabama and Virginia and us. And, you know, he can go wherever he wants in the country. But he's a perfect fit for Baylor. Right. The recruiting piece, we got to stop taking so much credit for things as coaches. I mean, our players do everything for us. And then just the other thing I'll say Gonzaga is really good at is just the scouting, the details, the game planning, the understanding that pace and toughness kind of overwhelm a lot of things in college basketball. I mean, you just hanging out with that for 3 years, you'd be dumb not to stop and listen as much as talk sometimes. You just need to learn. So hopefully I helped them a little bit, but I know for sure they helped me a bunch.
That's great. Hey, John, I know we expected this season to be really good defensively because we were great last year and we returned a lot of players and two of the best on-ball defenders in the country in Davion Mitchell and Mark Vital. But offensively, we've been explosive. We've scored over 80 points every game. The efficiency numbers have been really high. And I heard an interview with Jared Butler where I think it was one of the post-game interviews where he said that you get a lot of the credit for just emphasizing crisp ball movement, not letting the ball stick. I mean, what has been your emphasis as a coach and as a coaching staff to try to make sure that, you know, these guys really buy into, you know, sharing the basketball leads to better offense, leads to better individual performances?
Yeah, I mean, that's nice of Jared to say, but at the end of the day, the ball moves because the players move it. And, I mean, you look at Scott, I think 11 or 12 of the last 13 years, he's been the head coach of an offense that's been top 25 on KenPom. So clearly he knows what he's doing. And anytime he shares with us, he lets all his assistant coaches coach. So it's wonderful to work for him in that way. But Scott will bend and break and change and grow around his personnel. And every great coach is going to adjust to your personnel. And one thing that's pretty unique about us is in this college basketball one and done age, we've got 3 really good guards that you've got in your program for 3 years. Now, one of the years, Maceo and Davion sat out, but Jared and those two came in at the same time. So the level of accountability that we have with them, the level of friendship, the level of trust, the level to say, if you don't move the ball, you're just not playing this year. And for them to believe that that's going to be true. And you can be an All-American, Jared, but you're literally going to sit down if you stop the ball this year. And then for them to smoothly buy into that, I think the trust of being together 3 years is probably the greatest gift of that. Now, we did our job. We talked to NBA coaches. We talked to NBA scouts. We looked at all the analytics. We knew we had some things to work on. We were the 17th best offense last year, but clearly we could be better, and we can be better than we are right now. But when you add that age and then you add some of the rolling that John and Flo are doing, and then you add the youth and shooting and the transfers into the mix. I just think we would have been foolish to pull the ball as much as we did last year.
Yeah, and to that point, Brendan Manning, I think, was doing the game versus Kansas State, and he mentioned this during the telecast that Villanova and Baylor are the two best teams that he's seen with jump stops and avoiding charges. It seems like, just I don't have the stats, but I mean, have we done a much better job? Has that been an emphasis that, you want to drive the ball only so far and, you want to avoid, getting those cheap charges each game?
Yeah, I mean, we've been jump stopping for over 3 years now. And I honestly don't think that it settled in until last year. And you can see our turnover percentage went down. We want that at 15 or below. I think we're hovering around 16 to 17. We only had 5 turnovers last night.
Yep.
But the jump stop thing for us is real. The other thing in this offseason, we knew we had to get better at our 2-point field goal finishing. And so the constant balance of understanding when it's okay for the guard to go, when he needs to jump stop, how the spacing moves around him, where the big needs to stand, how often the big needs to be lifted so we can finish at a higher percentage. Like we maneuvered and manipulated a lot of our floor spacing just so between the ball screen reads and then the individual drives to the jump stop or finish can change. And the guards, they're doing a great job. I mean, they're not just them, but the forwards. I think Adam's shooting over 60% from 2. Davion's shooting 60% from 2. Mace was at 56. Jared's over 50. So they're starting to. Last year I thought we jump stopped well, but I think this year we've taken the next step where we know when to jump stop. And now our 2-point finishing has gone from pretty average, in my opinion, to above average. So that balance needs to stay right. But the jump stop thing is a real thing for us.
So what are the personalities like on this team? Yeah, I'm just always curious about that kind of stuff because I know chemistry is so important, and I can't recall many times in my career when I've seen a team that blends together and gets along as well as this group does, and last year's team as well. Is there a leader on this squad? Does everyone just kind of have their own quirks that just blend together perfectly? Why is there such harmony in that locker room? Who's the leader behind that?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit about what I was saying earlier about Gonzaga and Baylor. Is like I think the coaching staff's kind of figured out that player-led teams matter more than coach-led teams. Mm-hmm. And if you just go back to like Makai, King, and Jake, that was a super intelligent, highly confrontational, not scared of the coaches. And Kristen goes down, we're in January, we're going to fix this thing, mm-hmm. And it's almost like their personality was perfect for that time. Yeah. Last year, I mean, Freddie and Obim, I maybe nobody will believe it, but the 2 walk-ons changed us. And mm-hmm. They taught us to smile. They made us fearless. Obim literally was an extra coach. And the joy that they played with and the smile that Obim had and how hard Freddie worked, it kind of just infused its way through the starters, through the locker room. Our guys are hanging out in the locker room 2-3 hours a day. I mean, it was their second home before COVID stole it.
Right.
And so we kind of thought losing Obim was a big deal. Like we did everything we could to keep Obim as the GA. But Obim, even as a GA, has learned that locker room is not his place. And thankfully, guys like Flo's smiling more than ever. John, everyday John, I mean, just stand next to him for 5 minutes and try not to smile.
Yeah.
Maceo and Davion are best friends. They have since they got here, and they just refuse to let people not be happy. And then you see Mark, who's been here 5 years, and I mean, nobody's confronting Mark. Mark's going to make sure everybody stays in line. So you have this flavor of fun and smiley from the bigs, and then you got this confrontation and balance and a funny guy in Mark, and then you got this best friendship in Davion and Maceo, and that kind of buzzes its way through. And then Jared Butler seems to just kind of move in and out of everything. And our bench, I mean, they had 55 points last night.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're in a hard spot. You're trying to keep so many good players happy, but it's easier to keep them happy when they're happy.
Yeah.
And I can't even do a good enough job of explaining the way those guys get along. And to get along as well as they do this year when they're stuck in their apartments, living in bubbles, not allowed to go out. They're good young men, and we're lucky. we're lucky. That's the culture piece. That's the recruiting piece. We probably spend as much time on body language and smiling and background checks in our recruiting now than we ever have. And if you do your job up front, then the locker room's just going to be better. And I would say from Scott down through all the coaches, we love our locker room right now. Absolutely love it.
I was going to ask you, you mentioned earlier about finding guys that are right for Baylor. Like, what kind of questions are you asking in recruiting, or what kind of research are you doing to make sure that guys are right for Baylor and that you are identifying and going after the right people in that respect?
Yeah, I'll give you Scott Drew's story. Scott wants to do something, and, you know, when he does something, it's nothing less than 100 out of 100. I mean, I'm talking full pace, nonstop, 100 phone calls. He won't stop till he gets it. And so we're going down this road. We decide we're going to go in this culture direction. You know, we have these meetings as a staff, and Coach Tang and Coach AB and I are eating at Papados on the road while recruiting, and we're having meetings about how we're going to make sure we do this well. Scott shows up one day, and he's got 100 questions that we can ask recruits typed out on a piece of paper. And so, like, there is no detail with Scott Drew that isn't going to get taken care of. And not every question is for every guy.
Yeah.
But we know what we're looking for. And even like on recruiting visits, I know that we can't recruit now. They're not allowed on campus. I mean, Coach he'll eat one-on-one with the guy and spend 3 hours with the recruit at breakfast at George's. And he'll make sure that they, like, get along and it's a real match. And I'll say the last piece is our players that are on the team have full right to come and tell us he doesn't fit at Baylor.
Right.
And so when Jared Butler comes and says, hey, this guy's a Baylor guy, and you look at Jared Butler and you're like, okay, one Baylor guy to another, we believe him. Right. And you start getting into year 2, 3, 4, 5, and it hopefully takes care of itself, but just sets his mind to something, you know, we all serve him. Usually it ends up okay.
You know, when NFL and NBA players are about to draft guys, they're not just talking to the player, but they're doing background checks. They're interviewing people close to him. Do you guys?
Yeah, all that happens. All that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that, and, you know, those people end up being important while the guys are here. I think there's only 6 BCS schools south of Kentucky, like in the South, you know, our area, Big East. I'm talking SEC, ACC, Big 12 that didn't have a transfer. And we're one of those 6.
Yeah.
So it's not just on the front end, how are you recruiting them? It's when they're here, how are you keeping them?
Right.
And a lot of those people that are in their life that give us the right advice on them end up being the people that help us while they're here. So our family extends far outside our locker room, and you just got to trust the people you can trust. And then eventually you end up landing on the right kids.
So, John, I do have to ask you, I noticed one funny moment in the game last night. Matthew Meyer drove into the paint, and he had Jared Butler on the wing. And I looked over at the bench, and you and Coach Tang almost in unison did one of these, like, because he took a charge and he didn't pass the ball to Jared Butler on the wing. I mean, is that something that when you go over film, I mean, that's a big emphasis. I mean, those kind of moments, I mean, it's almost like you saw it coming, you know, like you knew what the result was going to be before it happened. Do you recall the play that I'm talking about?
No, I recall it. Listen. Unfortunately, God gives coaches photographic memories. And usually they tend to stick on the negative side more than the positive side.
Right.
So you remember things like that. But one, I want to say Matt's really grown.
Yeah.
Okay. 2, we're really proud of him. And you got to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot, and jump stop is important. All right. Those 4, you got, and if you're 6'9" and you can do that, we're going to be in on the player development part of that for as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And Matt's in that process, and Matt's doing a good job. And Jared was open. Matt should have jump stopped, and he should have hit Jared, but he did, you know. But I'll tell you, against K-State, he had 3 corner cut drives to the rim where he looked the part.
Yeah.
And you see him in transition with Davion in a couple plays yesterday, and he's really grown. So we're not asking for perfection. All we're asking for is a growth mindset where you're going to take the coaching and you're going to keep learning. And that's just where we need Matt to be. It's where we want him to be. It's where he's been more often this year than ever. but certainly that he could have jump stop on that play, but he'll be okay. He'll get there.
All right. So I want to ask you one analytic question. So I was looking up the KenPom analytics of national champions in the past 10 years, and almost all of them had an adjusted efficiency margin over 30. And right now, Baylor and Gonzaga are over 30, and we're the only two schools over 26. But we got a schedule that got really disrupted this year, and we've had to fill in some games here. And on paper, these games look like they could be mismatches. Of course, you got to play the games, you got to win them. But I mean, is there like a mindset that, I mean, we're almost competing against a standard versus our opponent, in order to achieve what we want to achieve at the end of the year, that we've got to hit a standard each and every night out? Is that really the emphasis this year?
Yeah, we call it going 1-0 in everything you do.
Right.
So every possession, you got to go 1-0. Every TV timeout, we can't lose medias, we call them. You can't lose a media. You can't lose a half. You can't lose a game. And we'll shrink the game and the possession and the defensive possession and the rebounding down to every single detail we can, so they take the whole thing seriously. But as much as coach is doing like a home run job on making sure these guys have a grasp on the bigger picture. I mean, you're talking about Mark Maceo, Jared, and Davion. I think they're 32-4 right now as starters. And just 9 months ago, the Final Four was taken away from them. And I have no idea whether we would have made it or not. That tournament, you could play it 10 different times and get 10 different champions. So you never know. But there's no way those four came back to not be dialed in. And like everybody's about that. Not just those four, but the players, the guys that play with them. Nobody wants to waste this. And when you have COVID take away basketball, like we went, I think 200 some days between 5-on-5 sessions, between our last time before the Big 12 tournament and our first 5-on-5 session, when we got back. Nobody wants to waste this. Nobody's interested in that. So it almost doesn't even matter what your jersey says right now. Not for us, not for our guys. And again, that's player driven. You don't do what we're doing right now if the players don't want to do that. There's a lot of coaches who have the same mantras. They're asking, like I said, it's not rocket science. A lot of smart coaches are asking their players to do the same thing. But we have this unique group who's just really dialed in to making this count. So I don't think we may lose games, but you're not going to see us take the night off. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. John, I saw some I don't remember, it was a national writer recently tweet out after a big game by Flagler, where is Baylor finding these guys? I mean, you've got Jonathan playing well and Adam playing well, guys that were kind of under the radar people, coming out of high school, whatever. Is there stories there? I mean, I want to hear like the Adam Flagler recruitment story, how you identified him and what you kind of said to him to make him think he was a good fit at Baylor. You told me a little bit about you calling and going over some statistical things you had seen in his game at Presbyterian, but what do you remember about that whole process?
One, I remember that we fell in love to the point that I skipped Easter with my family.
Right.
So Easter in April, I woke up, took a plane by myself to Georgia, rented a car, and met with his mom and dad and him at the house.
Yeah.
And, his dad is a strong Christian, successful, man, and he's right up Coach Drew's alley. I think his favorite pastor is Charles Stanley, and Coach Drew's favorite podcast is Andy Stanley. And so some of these things you don't even have control over. You show up to the house and then you just start realizing that the family really cares about what we care about. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's luck. I think that's God's providence. That's his grace. And none of us have control over that. So some of this is just a perfect fit at the perfect time, and the people match, and the parents match, and the kid matches. Mm-hmm. And after the 4 or 5 hours I spent at the house, I mean, we spent a long time together just talking as a family, and they drilled me, and I asked him some questions, and I went over his analytics and how we would teach him to read a ball screen and how he would function in our offense. And how multiple guards and multiple point guards is what wins national championships, and how we want to turn him into a point guard and improve his ball screen skills. And it felt like when I left, I was already coaching him.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like that. And then when he came on campus, we take him out to dinner, we spend time with him. Everybody just falls in love with him more and more. And then at the end of the day, I think Jared Butler closed that deal.
Really?
I'll just be honest. Yeah, I think Maceo helped close that deal. I think Maceo and him came from the same conference, same scenario.
Yeah.
Left. Their coaches left. They probably wouldn't have transferred if their coach didn't take a different job. They were really good players who were producing at a high level, but they were kind of stuck and they needed a new home. And at an odd time, they just found a home with us. And, probably the most interesting thing is I just told my wife, hey, I love you and I love Easter, but I'm going recruiting. But beyond that, it's just that our staff fell in love. We did it together, and Adam just happened to be the right guy. And I mean, you can see it. You can see it when you interview him, when you talk to him, when you watch him play.
Yeah.
He's a Baylor kid. He's a Baylor guard. You just watch, and you're like,
Right.
he's one of us.
Yeah, well, I definitely think fans are falling in love with him, and also with Jonathan. There's so much talk about his energy and his passion, but let's not forget he's playing really well too. He's not just the guy out there giving energy. He's impacting the game with his production, which to me is a tad surprising, just because I thought sometimes with these bigs, it takes them a month or two to really feel comfortable out there, especially when they haven't had a ton of experience. But man, he's just catching on quickly. Is there a story there with him that you'd like to tell people? And I don't know if you're the lead guy on him or not, but I know you know him well.
I text him a bunch. But I mean, if we're telling the truth, Scott was the lead guy on him.
Yeah.
And I mean, Scott made us watch his clips at UNLV 2,000 times. I mean, we sat in that room just mulling over, like, is this the guy? And we did background checks. I'm friends with an NBA scout, an Australian guy. I just met him from traveling and overseas stuff. And John, he went to Australia for high school. Mm-hmm. So he's known him since he first started playing basketball. And Danny told me that this is the sweetest, nicest, happiest, hardest working kid that you're ever going to find. And then if you can get his body right and you can fix a couple of things and bring the vertical back, that you're going to find yourself somebody who's going to help you be a top 5 offensive rebounding team. But Coach did the background and the work on that stuff. And I mean, Big John, everyday John and Coach, they're like the same person, and they're just different body types. They're the same person. You know what I mean? One jumps 4,000 feet in the air, and one won't stop.
Right.
Both just every day the same, positive, happy people. And I think Coach Tang's done a great job with him. I think Coach Peterson has helped. I think Coach Charlie hit a home run. And what's super important to all this jump stopping and analytics and efficiencies on KenPom, and you can ask all these people, is vertical spacing. Our spacing's good, but our vertical spacing is elite. And you better account for the fact that we're throwing that thing up to 13 feet. And you don't know when it's coming. But if you help at all, we have 5 guys that can shoot 40% from 3 just waiting to shoot an open one.
Yeah.
And the tension of that is super important. And John will run, he'll smile, he'll do everything we ask of him. I mean, him and Mark and Flo, they're just Charlie. Look at what Charlie does with these kids. They're unbelievable athletes. They're just specimens.
Yeah.
But John seemed to land at the perfect spot in the perfect way when we needed vertical spacing the most. And the other stuff is going to come. The 2 or 3 months that you talked about, it takes some time for kids to show things.
Yeah.
I promise you're going to see something in John's game in January and February and be like, wow, it's been there in practice, but it pops. But the thing that didn't take 3 months is that he jumps 15 feet in the air. That didn't take 3 months.
Okay. And he plays with great energy, right? And he plays with great energy, and that leads to a lot of good things too when you're hustling and doing all that.
That's where Coach Tang deserves a lot of credit. You can focus on what somebody can't do, or you can highlight the heck out of what somebody can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they're doing what they can do, you can work on the other stuff in an empty gym with nobody watching. So, Scott was the lead on that. I think the whole staff did a great job helping, but he was the lead. But Coach Tang and Coach Charlie deserve a lot of credit for where John's come.
So, John, let me ask you this. You mentioned the body language piece and how you guys are really starting to, measure that and try to keep guys accountable for that. Obviously this is a challenging year. A lot of the gyms you're playing in are empty or they're sparsely attended. I know in the Illinois game, we got a lot of national praise for how engaged and energetic our bench was. I mean, what are you looking for? How are you measuring body language and some of these intangibles?
Yeah, Coach AB Alvin, he's a body language doctor, and he's come up with a whole system, a grading system, and we go in depth. We have our GAs do a lot of work, a lot of boring work to grade some body language. And I've never been part of a program that graded body language, and I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm not Mr. Share everything with everybody kind of guy. Sure. But I can tell you one time somebody made a pass last night for an assist, and one guy pointed at the other guy, and the other guy didn't point back. AB's going to put that on film, and they're going to get punished for that. Not punished in a bad way, but they'll be reminded that, the most important thing is that you acknowledge each other.
Right.
They do all kinds of studies in the NBA where they said Steve Nash and Tim Duncan were the best teammates in the NBA for a period of time. It's because they gave the most high fives and pats on the backs and touched their teammates the most often. And I mean, Coach Peterson will track how many times our point guard gives high fives in practice, and they'll be confronted if they don't follow up and do a good job as a leader. So when I tell you that Scott is one of the most detailed guys and lets no rock be unturned, when it comes to knowing that we're going to have to be really high level with our body language in empty gyms this year, I mean, he's just going to double down on being great at that. So I think we've done a good job. I can take no credit for that. That's AB's system. That's Scott's accountability. That's Coach Tang yelling every once in a while. That's Coach Peterson making sure guards touch and give high fives. That's just a family thing. So that's just what we are. We're a family, and hopefully that shows up on TV and on the bench.
Are there anything, obviously, this will probably be interesting to Baylor fans and Gonzaga fans just because you worked at both places and they're the two arguably elite teams in college basketball this year so far. But are there some things that you look back in your Gonzaga years that, are anything come to mind that, as you are a coach at Baylor now, that you're like, I really want Baylor to do this that Gonzaga excelled at? I mean, are there some things that you brought to the table in that regard?
They probably influence everything I do. I'll be honest. There's some things about offense that they're really elite at. I think some of our ball screen reads, even bringing our GA Rem Backamus here and reinforcing certain things. He was a walk-on at Gonzaga. I mean, that's always going to stick with me. And I think the other cool thing is that Scott is like not only become friends with Mark, and they talk and they schedule together. They both fish and love talking fishing. I think seeing my time there turning into a friendship for those two, and then seeing that friendship really blossom in a way that I think helps both programs. There's no replacement for being humble enough to say that the smart take from the strong. And you can be as smart as you want to be. You can be a smart guy, but if you don't take things from a strong program like Gonzaga, you're wasting your time. And then there's a toughness to Gonzaga that they'll never get enough credit for because, everybody views them as this pretty offensive, fast-paced team, and they're in love with the offense. But there's a grittiness and a toughness and a willing to hit and, really care about winning above all else that winning matters. It's the most important thing. You can get all wrapped up in any kind of analytic you want, but winning trumps everything. It trumps every person's individual goals individual minds or attempts to make themselves the focus. And Gonzaga just doesn't let that happen there. I don't think we're letting it happen at Baylor. I think, Baylor's more important than the individual, but Gonzaga is unbelievable at teaching those kids to just care about winning and put the team first. Just unbelievable. And that's something I'll never forget.
Last couple of things from me, John. We talk so much about the chemistry of this team and how everyone gets along, but one thing that probably didn't get talked about enough, I think your staff, to me, just seems to have this great bond. Just, Coach Drew and his assistants. And what do you guys like to do? I mean, do y'all ever socialize away from the office? Is there a favorite restaurant you guys hang out at, or are you just always cooped up at the Farrell Center? Just tell me a little bit about this group and the unity that's there.
Well, you want the pre-COVID or the post-COVID version?
Let's go pre-COVID.
Well, I think you can't underestimate the fact that Scott and Jerome have been here 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no replacement for a friendship like that in our business. And when you see the way Jerome serves and loves Scott, it becomes real clear it's our job to take things off Coach's plate, not to try to bring our things to him or to make life harder on him. He's got enough
Mm-hmm.
going on. And then the more you take off his plate in a way that it ends up being excellent, you learn that you can do your job in an accurate amount of time, where you get to sit in an office and laugh with each other, where you get to go out to eat on the road and actually spend time together. When, you get to spend 30 minutes before you do your film session just talking about life and goofing around. Like, if you can operate at a high level, it frees you up to love each other more and be able to be intentional. And then you actually find that the less fearful you are and the more you just hang out and love each other, the stronger the bond becomes. And then the stronger the bond becomes, the more successful you are. Yeah. So all that fear thing of saying we've got to compete to the point where we never leave our office and we're not friends, that'll destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
And the healthiness of how we get along, how our faith is included, how Christ is at the center, the longevity of Scott and Jerome, and then how they share with us. And then Scott does a really good job of hiring different kinds of people. He brought me in from Gonzaga at the same time he brought Coach Peterson in from the NBA. At the same time, he brought Ty Beard in from small college basketball. But Ty went to here for undergrad and grad and loves Baylor above all else. So I just think the more you can kind of love each other and relax, the better off it is. And the cool thing about that is get along with each other to the point where sometimes it's just best to go home and be with your family. In our business, people seem to forget that your family is the most important thing. Like Coach Tang and Coach AB say this all the time. You're going to leave Baylor, you better be ready to mess with happy. And the happier we are, the easier this thing gets. And that's the hardest trick in our business.
Right.
And, that's the deal. That's the deal. We love, Coach Tang loves George's, AB loves Papados, Coach Drew loves fishing. I killed my first deer with my son, and Scott set that deal up. He killed his first deer with his son. Like, there's things we're doing. We're eating deer jerky in the office. We're telling stories. Clearly, we've got our own culture amongst us, but I hope when people see our staff, they see that we care about each other. Like
I do, and I'm glad to hear you mention names like Ty Beard and Aditya and Rim and all those guys. It just goes all the way down. And last thing for me, like when I watch this team, right now, you guys are playing at such a high level, and I think a lot of people's opinion is like Baylor and Gonzaga are so. I don't know if this is accurate, but like they're close to their ceiling, and there's a big gap between them and everyone else. But everyone else is going to kind of catch up as the year goes on. But how much better can you guys get? I mean, like as coaches, are you seeing tons of spots for improvement and things you can do better, or are you close to the ceiling now?
Yeah, we're not close to our ceiling right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just we're not there. It's not true. So
Right.
you take 7 days off in the middle of the season because of COVID, like we had to.
Yeah.
That's a hiccup. Like, there's not even a rhythm to what we're doing yet, practice-wise. There was for a stretch, and
Right.
I think even Coach Tang said, Coach New, he's been with Coach Drew. He played for the Drews. He's been with them over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Jay New is like my accountability guy with the guards. He's unbelievable what he does for Coach, and he's been here over 12 years. And Coach Tang and Coach New, they're saying stuff like, man, I don't know that we've ever found a rhythm like this for that month of practice. But then you're constantly dealing with the ups and downs of the season and the COVID. And we can be better at offense. We can be better at defense. We can be better at winning. We can be better at a lot of things right now. So I don't think that we're satisfied. And most importantly, I don't think our players think they're as good as they can be. And they want to win, but they also have dreams after this. And I don't think any of them think that stopping their player development right now is a good idea. So I bet you every one of our players would tell you they're not even close to how good they're going to be 3 months from now.
And I know that sounds like a dumb question, but you go out and score 100 in a Big 12 road game without your leading score. I mean, things looking pretty good, but I know coaches are always seeing spots. Ashley, what do you have to?
Could be negative.
I'll just ask one final question about Jeremy Sochan, because I know you were instrumental in his recruitment. And, I see, like, just in our interaction, Jason and I interviewed him, and Kendall Brown and Langston Love, and he just has like this infectious smile, just seems to be a very joyful kid. I mean, do you think he's bringing some of that qualities that Jonathan brings from that standpoint? Did you notice that in his recruitment?
Yeah, I bet you guys spent a lot of time with the three guys we signed. And I think if you spend any time with those three guys, you're gonna say, throw the rankings out the window. Those three are Baylor kids. And, they all bring different things to the table, but what they all bring is super high character, super high integrity. They're really good friends to the people in their life. They're leaders. And, part of Jeremy's leadership is that he smiles and he's happy. And the cool thing about the three of them is they talk to adults like they're adults already.
Right.
And so even as you guys talk to them, I'm sure you get the feeling of their full personalities. You get the feeling of who they can be 2 years from now, 4 years from now. You get the feeling of who they can be, not just on the court, but off the court. And the cool thing about being a Baylor is we're still college basketball coaches. So we're still taking 18 to 22-year-old men, and we're trying to make them better men. And above being a good coach, that's the main deal. So if we can get smiley, happy kids like those three to come to Baylor, they're hopefully going to make us look smarter than we really are. Right. But we're hopefully going to help them become great men. And I think all three of those will be home runs in every category.
I'll close with this question. We interviewed Quincy Acey, and I asked him about a moment, when he was a sophomore, where I sat in on a scouting meeting, and Scott would go around the room and he would ask a player, and he asked Quincy this question 3 times. He said, now you're going to catch Mike Singletary's for Texas Tech. He's going to catch the ball in the elbow. He's going to pump fake. What are you going to do? Quincy said, stay on the ground. He went around and did that. The 3rd time, Quincy said, I'm going to stay on the ground. And then in the game, as soon as Singletary caught the ball in the elbow, he pump faked, and Quincy went flying a mile in the air, and Singletary got a layup. And it just, at that point, it made me realize that as coaches, you're so dependent upon 18 to 22-year-olds executing a game plan. And you talked about the maturity of this team. I mean, as far as scouting reports and game plans, have you ever been a part of any team? Is there a team at Gonzaga that maybe is close to what we have now? I mean, as far as, these guys being locked in and just ready to execute a game plan, have you seen anything like it in your coaching career?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be fair. The Kevin Pangos, Gary Bell squad was as good as scouters as I've ever been around. Maybe the most complete scouting team top to bottom was that Nigel Williams-Goss, Shemek Karnowski, Final Four national championship team. I mean, you could give them a scout, that thing was memorized. Like, they were calling out the sets in the game for you. That whole group deserves a lot of credit, but we're real intentional about getting there. And I would say that this group is real close, if not right there. And They memorize things. They watch additional film. They know personnel. They're dialed in. When they make a mistake, they know it. When they make a mistake, they're called out for it. When it pops up on the film, most of them have already watched the game and they know where their mistake was and they want to fix it. But you start talking about those 4 guys we've had together for 3 years and the way they memorize scouts, the way they can switch and know exactly what we're supposed to do in our defensive scheme and rotations. That's why staying old in college basketball is really important. I mean, you just have full-grown men on our team who can do more than throw around the weight that Coach Charlie's given them in the weight room. They can understand and memorize everything they need to. And those guys are unbelievably special. And that's even an area we can get 1% better every day. It'll help us, but they're already really, really good.
Yeah. All right, John. Well, hey, we kept you long enough. That was such an insightful conversation, and it's been a fun few months. Hopefully, we can get all these games in and things will get back to normal. But exciting times ahead. So again, thanks for the time today, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for all you do for us, and look forward to seeing you guys soon. Also, have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Okay, for Ashley Hodge, I'm Jason King with the Sikkim 365 podcast for the Field of 68 Network. Subscribe on iTunes. Thanks.